I'm Adam Pilder, the president of the AFP Greater San Fernando Valley chapter. I want to especially thank CCS Fundraising for putting on this great webinar. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this, because I think a lot of people are very interested in seeing how to fundraise in these challenging times. We're definitely in very unprecedented times now with COVID-19, and a lot of people are trying to look for ways to keep the fundraising going, because nonprofits are continuing to need to raise money. I think a lot of us, we're very anxious, we're stressed, but we know that this will eventually end, and we will come out stronger. I think a lot of our nonprofits will need the money more than ever, and I think it's going to create a new wave of generosity among our donors. I really believe that. With that, I'm just going to talk about AFP really briefly, about our chapter. We're about a 50-member chapter currently. We've been in the Valley for about 30 years. We every first Thursday of the month, we have a luncheon where we network with our fellow members, just talking about new fundraising strategies and trends in the community. I myself have been on the board for about 8 years and a member for 9 years. And it's been one of the best networking groups I've ever been a part of. I've met so many experienced seasonal fundraisers through this group. And I want to really encourage everyone to learn more about our chapter. We're based, we have our meetings in Sherman Oaks every first Thursday. We have other events going on, mixers. We do our National Philanthropy Day in November, which will be on November 5th, Thursday. And we just hope you'll consider learning more about what the benefits are of joining our AFP group. If you'd like to know more, you can either reach out to me. Again, I'm Adam Pilder, and I'm the president, or Kathy Gallernew, who's our membership chair as well. And we'll send out a follow-up email as well afterwards. So, just wanted to kind of, talk about our AFP chapter. But now I'd like to, in the interest of time, introduce CCS Fundraising, Lindsay Block and Ashika Patel. Did I say it right, Ashika?
Ashika.
Ashika. I'm sorry, Ashika. We're very
okay. Great try, Adam.
Well, I'm trying. Sorry, but no,
no, you did great.
We're very excited to have you both talk about what's going on currently with just fundraising trends right now. And I think a lot of people are really interested in. We had about 86 people signed up for this, so a lot of people are interested in hearing your presentation. So thank you so much for having this today. And with that, I will give the floor to you.
Thanks, Adam. Diana, will you walk us through some details?
Yep. I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping things. So if you joined on our Ring Central here, you should be seeing, when you signed in, you should have seen a choose your audio conference option. If you hear music through your computer, then you have joined the presentation using your computer speaker system. If you would like to join by phone, just select phone call and the dial-in information will be displayed. In advance of this presentation starting, please be sure to mute yourself on your phones and computers so that we can provide a clean recording of the webinar to you guys afterwards. You'll have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presentation by typing in your questions to the group chat, as many of you have already started putting things in. Send in your questions anytime during the presentation. We'll collect these and address them during the Q&A section of today's presentation. And with that, I will turn this over to Lindsay and Ashika.
Thanks so much, Diana. I think I'll introduce myself and then allow Ashika some time to introduce herself. Again, my name is Lindsay Block. I'm a Senior Vice President with CCS Fundraising. I'm sure many of you know of us or have heard me speak recently, looking at perspectives on philanthropy just this last fall, actually, with the chapter. I've been with the firm for almost 14 years now, working in a variety of sectors, everything from human services to religious organizations, research institutes, LGBTQ organizations. And so I'm really excited to be talking with all of you today about what we're seeing across the board and some of our best advice for dealing with the current crisis. Ashika?
Thanks, Lindsay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join. I'm Ashika. I've been with CCS for 8 years, and I came to CCS by way of the American Civil Liberties Union. I have a master's degree in fundraising, which I'm sure you're all thinking, how on earth could it be a master's degree? But it certainly is, and I'm very excited to talk with all of you. I have various sector experience, much like Lindsay, but I think we can all agree that what we're seeing right now is certainly new. And we are looking forward to digging in with you today on some of these questions and content.
All right. So, our introduction. I know we're all dealing with various levels of crisis management right now. We certainly are with CCS and the clients that we are currently working with, as well as past clients and other organizations we're all associated with. It's an unprecedented time. You know, the best that we have, I think, is to learn from previous crises, to take lessons learned from 2008, 2001, and apply them as best we can to the current situation. I think we're all continuing to learn as we go. It's a fast learning curve, quite honestly. Things are changing day to day, and we as development professionals really have to be able to shift and adjust and be flexible with those day-to-day changes. I do want to say that while we are going to be looking at some general principles here, there's really no one-size-fits-all when it comes to dealing with this crisis for different organizations. You know, if you're working with a hospital or a human services organization, you're probably seeing a huge influx of clients and donations and just working completely overtime. Whereas, you know, we know the arts have been hit really hard by this, not being able to host a performance or invite people into a museum. So we are going to cover some very general, high-level ways of looking at things right now. Again, we don't expect everything to fit for everyone, but hopefully you can find a piece of it that applies for your organization. Ashka and I are both also going to provide some examples of what we're seeing on the ground right now from different organizations that we're working with, so hopefully you can be inspired leaving from our conversation today. I did want to just open with a quick quote. I'm going to summarize it here, but it's from a recent article that the prior Tulane University president wrote recently, Scott Cohen, and I think it really captures what we're here to talk about today. And he said that community is about a sense of belonging and trust. It's open, responsive, and reliable communication that is the foundation. It requires ingenuity and experimentation. The collective experience deepens the connection, the loyalty, and the bond. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ashka.
Thanks, Lindsay. That's a fantastic introduction. I think that recognizing the sort of unique implications of this time is essential in charting our course forward. All of you work at organizations and represent organizations that are centers of gathering. And as Lindsay was talking about, you know, community is garnered by communication. And in the absence of being able to represent or be places that gather people, what are we doing to enhance some of those communication strategies? The physical distancing that comes with the unique implications of this situation, they allow for the opportunity for us to take the time to plan and reflect, look ahead, think about how our organizations will need to work differently on the other side of this crisis. Not only should staff be communicating frequently, but we should be communicating frankly with donors. What our needs are as an institution, it's important to communicate what those are. Those who have shown up year over year to support your work, they want to know what's happening with you right now, so that they can understand where they can step in and help and support the work that you do. Don't discount the years of time you've put into relationships, only to abandon those people now by being sort of gun shy, if you will, to go out and tell them that you're in a place of fear or uncertainty. We can really lean on our communities to help us plan the way forward, and we should. So from there, Lindsay, I'll turn it back to you about some of these immediate strategies that we can implement.
Great. So looking overall, I want to sort of summarize. We have a larger list of 10, but really what it comes down to is 4 basic principles. And those are, 1, to really reaffirm your mission. And I would look at that really creatively. And we'll talk about that in more detail, but you know, is your mission really to serve? Is it to educate? Is it to inspire? You know, there are ways that you can continue to connect people to really the critical parts of your mission at this current moment. You want to make short-term plans, right? We're all dealing with a lot of uncertainty now, and I'll talk about this soon too, but you know, I think the best advice that we can give at this moment is really think through what is your best case scenario, your worst case scenario, and what's likely to happen in between. You know, we want to put as much certainty around this current situation as we can, and that's what I find really to be the best way to do it. You know, if you don't know what your worst case scenario is and you don't know what your best case scenario is, it's going to be really tough to figure out what's likely to happen, right? So make some short-term plans there, and then to connect. Really, it's all about this connection right now, and utilizing technology in particular to make those connections. So we're going to walk through all of our 10 different timeless principles, and Ashka is actually going to get us started there.
Yeah, of course. So what you see on your screen here is all 10. And what Lindsay and I are going to do through the course of the presentation is really break each of these down and to help you think critically about how these are true today, but also how will they continue to be true in the coming weeks as circumstances evolve. So let's take a look at 1 and 2 together, increasing communication and communicating the financial impact. And so what you see here is we've really thought about this topic from two perspectives, right? Our internal stakeholders and our external stakeholders. Increasing communications means keeping everyone informed, but the way that we keep everyone informed, or the sort of narrative that we use, is going to be slightly different depending on if the stakeholder is internal or external. Bottom line, getting personal right now is key. So many people are receiving emails from different organizations, they're receiving follow-ups, but most importantly, we're all generally in front of a computer all day doing our work. And so it's pretty common that emails will just kind of fly, you know, back and forth through across a person's screen. But what are we doing to actually pick up the phone and call folks to see if they're engaging with the material that we're creating? So please feel free to pick up the phone and call people to follow up on some of the emails that you're sending out. Share news of what's happening on the ground with your organization. If you're a museum and you've taken your content online, get that out to your donors so that they know where that content is accessible. If you're a school and you're looking to reach out to families, how is philanthropy still in action or moving on campus, even though the students aren't there? It's an important vantage point that people will be thinking about, and an important one for us to certainly address with folks, get ahead of that communication in many ways. Don't hesitate to create links or get creative with links. Drive traction to different parts of your website that under normal circumstances people aren't really visiting. I know when organizations go through that marketing and branding exercise, there are so many different navigatable tools that are built into a website, but we don't often have the time to really be elevating the visibility. This is that time. Where can we really be showing people how multidimensional our organizations are? There are very much financial realities that all of our organizations are facing because of what's happening in the landscape. Some of those financial realities are at the board level. There are discussions that are being had at the board level. Transparency is key, right? Making sure that those people who have been lifelong friends or long-term friends understand the severity of the situation, but more importantly, what's the plan in place to address those financial realities? And for external stakeholders, what are we doing to address our financial realities? So if you're a food bank, for example, right now you might not be having a financially difficult time because everyone is sort of seeing the need for food banks and giving. How has that sort of increased revenue, right? How did the organization take sort of the opportunity, given what's going on, to elevate the visibility of the work and drive donations? Those are great stories to share. But if you're an organization that relies on earned revenue through, let's say if you're an arts organization putting on performances, what are we doing in place of having earned revenue to keep operations going? What are we essentially doing to help ourselves? Is there any reforecasting of the budget that we can share as we look ahead? It's a little, I think, unfortunate when organizations don't take the opportunity at the front end of a crisis to really pull people in, but instead then wait maybe a month or 6 weeks to say, wow, can't believe that we just got through that together. Now that we're on the other side, here's what we're going to do. So really use the opportunity to be thinking week by week. I mean, that's how quickly things are changing, of the different creative ways that you can be connecting with donors and friends and patrons. Lindsay, back to you.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into utilizing technology, really leveraging technology. And I know that all of the organizations that Ashka and I work with are at varying levels of technology sophistication. And so we are at a point where you just need to get used to and familiar with whatever technology you can utilize. Quite honestly, people are expecting it. Our donors are expecting it. You know, it's never going to replace that in-person meeting. Having a Zoom meeting or a Ring Central meeting like this is okay. I wish we could have been in person, right? But in the meantime, this is what we have to work with. And, you know, we just have to be really honest that everyone is in the same situation currently. I'll say a lot of your donors are going to give you some grace with that right now, right? They understand you cannot be in person. They're restricted by the same rules. So let's make the best of the current situation with the technology that we do have. I want to encourage as much as possible utilizing video, live streams, anything you can where you can show your donors and your different constituencies what's happening for your organization, what's happening for you. If you think about it in terms of a hierarchy, you know, you gain so much more from seeing someone than you do from listening to them. If you don't have that capacity, you're still going to gain more from listening to somebody than by reading an email. It's also the fastest thing to do. It's really easy to spend a lot of time on an email editing back and forth before you finally send it out. But, you know, shooting a selfie video on your iPhone is really quick, really compelling for your donors. So I would highly encourage you to think about the hierarchy of how you're using your technology and making that meaningful for your donors. Some of the best things that we've seen already, one of our Salvation Army clients, actually the captain, recorded a video of himself in their food bank just specifically for his top donors to say, I wish I could be with you in person. I wish you could see everything that's happening right now, but I'm looking forward to scheduling a video chat with you soon. And it was so inspiring. People really wanted to jump in and be a part of that. So something quick and easy can get out there. I also want to mention the fact that you've really got to be sure to update your website. And I know that's usually the last thing for a development person. We are not usually the ones driving the website. But if you don't have anything on the website about how your organization is responding to the current crisis, people are going to think you're the ostrich burying your head. I've just visited 5 or 6 websites in the last day or so just to see what they're doing. And it's always surprising to me when I don't see anything. It's like we're operating as normal in a very unnormal environment. And so that is a bit off-putting for your donors and for anyone who's interested in your organization. So be sure to connect with your tech support, your IT, be sure something is up, even if it's just we understand that we're all in a crisis right now, and we'll be working to get you more information in the coming days and weeks. The next piece to really consider is special fundraising initiatives. You know, as we were talking about before, there's a best case scenario, a worst case scenario, and then something in between. And what I mean by that really is as Ashka was saying, looking at your financial situation and also the situation for your potential clients or those that you serve, those who are involved with your organization. What's the best case scenario? If things pick back up in another month, where would your organization be? Ballpark, right? If things go to the worst and it's maybe 3 or 4 months, where would your organization be? And then look to how you can utilize some special appeals to help bridge that gap. People understand right now that we're not in normal operating, right? There's an understanding that people are losing their jobs. Yes, every organization is affected, but there are people out there who are ready, willing, and able to give, and they want to be directed to how they can support you, right? And how they can support what you're doing right now. In fact, I just got an email from the LA Ballet about 2 days ago saying that they are going to be falling $400,000 short of their annual budget right now because they can't have their spring performance and they can't have their annual event. And so they have already started their appeal for $400,000 to all of their donors so that they can keep their ballet performers employed and everything backstage. So I would think about, one, your case. What is it that you are trying to raise funds for? Is it for personnel? Is it for added services? Is it for something else, right? Do we need to reconsider how we're operating in the next maybe 3 months to be sure that we are here and steady at the end of those 3 months, right? What is your case that you're fundraising for? What is that goal that you're going to put forward to your donors? Do we think it's achievable? Do you have some people who can help seed that fund and leverage their gift to secure others and involve others? That's one of the best ways some of our top donors can really feel like they're being supportive and useful in the current time. And then what does your timeline look like? Are you looking to do this in 2 weeks, in 4 weeks, in 4 months? Give it some thought. It doesn't need to be perfect either, I would say, with this kind of an emergency appeal. The important thing is that you're getting out there. I'm sure many of you have either started this already or have been getting appeals from other organizations for emergency needs. If your organization is not asking, you're not going to be getting anything. People are already out there and asking. It's like a regular annual development year, but crunched into about 3 weeks. So you've got to be moving fast. And you've got to be getting something out there. It doesn't need to be perfect. Again, I did want to mention just one more organization and what they're doing in this current situation with these kind of special fundraising initiatives, which is the Ronald McDonald House, the Southern California chapter, but specifically the Orange County House. They are now doing a virtual walk. Right, so they're getting creative with their technology. They would normally have thousands upon thousands of people gathered in stadiums across Southern California to be walking for the house, right? Families, individuals, they got friends everywhere, but they can't do it this year. And so they've transitioned it to this really creative virtual way of participating. So I'd encourage you to check that out. But they've also been sending out 3 main ways that their donors can help them, right? So not just 1, but 3 ways that their donors can help them. Providing a meal, participating in the walk, and then making a gift, right? Keep it short, simple, and easy. And they've had some real success with seeing responses to that. Ash?
Thanks, Lindsay. So Lindsay went through the different mediums that you can use to be connecting with folks. And then she also talked about the sort of different narrative points or messaging points to be able to reach people. How do we then translate that into the actual activity of our work? And I'd like to talk with you a little bit about special briefings. So usually we think about briefings when we think about a targeted ask for a campaign, for example, or a special appeal. We'll bring a person or a group or a foundation representative or a group, a corporate cluster together to brief them on organizational priorities and what we're thinking about doing. Those special briefings are important now more than ever before, pulling groups together on the inside to let them know about what we're doing. And the wheel that you see here, half a wheel, and the 5 different points kind of share some different platforms with which you can connect with people on. So talking about general operations, schedule, events, cancellations or postponements, making sure giving opportunities have visibility, people have insight into what's happening with employees at the organization, short-term and long-term plans. But remember that at the core of these briefings, as we think about it as fundraisers, there are opportunities for connection. I want to go back to an earlier point that I made about nonprofits being centers of community, places of gathering. And in the absence of being able to leave your home and gather, I think as people, we still crave that coming together with a common purpose or with a shared goal. So if we think about some organizations that are really utilizing special briefings during this time, I'd like to share some examples of some things we've seen. A former client of ours is the Caton Children's Museum, and as you can imagine, a children's museum relies on earned revenue to be able to meet its operational budget. However, in the absence of being able to do that, a lot of programs have moved online. How families can be using those programs to enrich their child's education on a daily basis is yet to be learned, right? Those are not tools or skills that a young parent or a parent has, because these are not circumstances they've ever seen. And so the museum has been conducting special briefings for parents of young children who use the museum to explain how the curriculum that we're putting online enriches education that a child is receiving from their school, and how to utilize those programs to really grow that education. These briefings, again, the fundamental point is to pull people in to create a dialogue. And that's how I think the conversation gets started of what does the future look like for us? One of the great functionalities on Zoom is that you can actually bring everybody together as a group. So you'll see everyone on your screen in gallery mode. And then you can put everybody in breakout rooms. So the system automatically pairs people off. And so let's say you're doing a briefing with 10 prospective donors, or 10 donors and prospective donors. After maybe 20 minutes of some sort of presentation, how can everyone separate out into breakout rooms to discuss that presentation, their ideas, their reactions, and then come back together as a group to discuss some of those findings and those feelings. This all builds engagement. This continues to build community. This continues, I think, an organization's commitment to gathering these special briefings for sure. An additional, I think, creative briefing that we've recently seen is we're working with the Museum of the Holocaust here in Los Angeles, and they work with a significant survivor population. And those survivors and their stories have a tremendous amount of value throughout time, but especially while they are living. And so to take advantage of the time that they have, the museum has been hosting special briefings with survivors, so conversation Q&As with survivors that allow people who join to engage in the chat room, ask questions to the survivors, some that are fun, some that are friendly, and it really got sort of a sense of really great community going. And I'm really pleased to report that 2 days ago, the briefing that they held had 2,500 viewers, which is just extraordinary. It's not just the marketing of these initiatives, but really the content and how we're thinking creatively about what we want to accomplish in connection through that briefing. Additionally, if we look at number 6 from the table, avoiding the wholesale cancellation of plans. So many of you, as soon as you found out that you would be staying home for a significant period of time, you thought ahead to the next 4 weeks in your calendar and you said to yourself, oh, I'm going to miss XYZ event that I was looking forward to because I was going to see, Jane Doe and John Smith, and I can't wait to see them. I haven't seen them in such a long time. When we move forward with canceling fundraising plans, what does that communicate to our constituents about our willingness to gather, our willingness to continue building that community? Those are important questions to ask. And so while you may have had a 90-minute, let's say, campaign meeting on calendar for your volunteers, it may be difficult to host a 90-minute meeting via Zoom conference or some electronic platform. But how can we look at the agenda for that meeting, pare it down to 30 minutes, and get everyone on camera? What's a fun icebreaker activity that everyone could participate in, or some great trivia questions? Avoid the wholesale cancellation of plans. People are looking for things to look forward to, right? And your organization can be that place that builds community and really fosters that in these uncertain times. Lunches or donor meetings can be taken over video conference. Lindsay mentioned coffees. Those have been kind of fun. We've been on a couple of those. Definitely keep up weekly team meetings within your development departments. If we are looking to communicate with donors or stay in constant communication with them as leadership, we need to be signaling that to all of our teams. So getting them together regularly, getting them comfortable interacting via technology is only going to help them develop the skills to then do that outreach with donors and grow the impact of the team. Any conferences that you had coming up, how can they be turned into a forum? Is there a exercise that the group can do before you get them together that you can then, share the polling of or share the data from once the group is together. That's kind of a fun way to rethink how we're gathering for forums and conferences right now, and the type of creativity we're really going to need to see in our sector, so that when we reach the other side of this, we come out in a position of strength. There's been a lot of questions and discussion around what to do about galas and fundraising events. And this is really challenging. Short of asking people to get dressed up in their finest gowns and join via video conference and a glass of champagne, it's really difficult to replace a gala in a practical way. But more importantly, the revenue that's generated from that gala is what's going to help an organization sustain. So don't assume that because your gala is not taking place, that people wouldn't be willing to uphold their support or maintain their support, knowing that the organization relies on that revenue. And so if you have a gala that was supposed to be coming up within the next 3 months, get on the phone with those donors and talk about, the reality that that gala is likely not going to be rescheduled this year, possibly, but how those dollars are so essential. There's the opportunity to move any plans for an auction online. People have a ton of time at home and want to look for different ways to support an organization, but also have some sort of incentive in return. Why not get creative with your silent auction items and put them online? How can you convert ticket sales into donations? It's amazing what we're seeing just in the last 3 weeks as a firm, the generosity of people across the board. No one could have anticipated that the times would be as bad as they are. But for the organizations that have so steadfastly kept in touch with their friends, those people are showing up in droves to say, what can I do right now? What can I do to be helpful? A lot of times our answer as fundraisers is you can give, but think creatively about different ways to invest. And I know Lindsay mentioned some previously. But I think an action plan will help you do this type of long-term planning. So I'd love to pass it over to you, Lindsay, to take us through what a plan like that could look like.
Great, thanks. And if you are a control freak like I am, you're really looking for ways that you can control whatever you can right now, right? There's a lot that's not in our control. So what can we control? And I am a huge fan of creating plans, lists, plans, time it out. I want to know what my next month is going to look like, so I know, exactly what I need to be doing on each and every day. It's helpful for me. I know not everybody operates that way, but we as development professionals can certainly operate that way right now, and demonstrate our value. We are thinking about exactly how we're going to be communicating with people. We're thinking about the plan for the next 30, 60, 90 days. And while not everything may get pushed forward, it's certainly going to be valuable to your board, to your executives, and to your donors, right? That you've put thought into this and are preparing for the next 3 months or so. And I would look at this really first and foremost in terms of what is your communications plan, because that's where we're all focused right now. What is our plan to communicate with our internal individuals, with our other staff, with our volunteers, with our donors? And they're each going to be slightly different messages, right? Not everybody's going to receive the exact same communication. This is one area where you can take sort of a template and personalize it for each different group, each different constituency. The same overall message may apply, but how you're saying it, the details that you're providing may be slightly different for each. And I would consider thinking about that in terms of what are the communications we need to get out this week? What's the most immediate? And then what do we think we need to be communicating in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks from there, right? You want to be sure that you are setting yourselves up to being consistent and constant communication with each of those different audiences, but in new and different ways too. You've got to keep it a little bit interesting for everybody, right? You can't just have the same picture on your website for the next 4 weeks. People won't return. So switch things up. And a plan like this can really help you see how you are altering those and how often you are going to be in contact with people, because you want to be sure you're touching everybody at least, I would hope, at least once a week, if not once every 2 weeks to 3 weeks. People are inundated with information right now, right? So you've got to be sure that you're in that mix. If I haven't received something from an organization in about 2 weeks, I start to get a little worried about what they're doing and how they're doing, right? If I just see something like, hey, we're really inundated right now, and we'll be talking to you next week again with good news, that's enough for me. I would also suggest that you really think about the ways that you can keep your communications short and sweet and simple. This is probably going to come up again, but we're all seeing the same 3 to 4 paragraphs about the current crisis. I don't need to read, again, another 3 to 4 paragraphs about how we're all dealing with a challenging time and we're all going to consider about how we can get together on this. People want to know immediate impact, how they can help, what's going on, right? They want to read it quick, they want to read it fast. So I would think about that in some of your plans. I would also think about ways that you can continue to share good news. There's all types of different ways that we could be doing this. Even if it's just the CEO jumping on an iPhone to say, hey, I'm working from home and I got a new desk setup that I didn't have before, check it out. It's enough, it's a connection, but there's plenty of good news that can be shared around the board. The next piece then is also to consider about how you're going to reaffirm your mission and your impact, and that goes with that good news, right? We want to look at how is our organization really interrelating with this current crisis, and it could be in a number of different ways, right? I would think about an arts organization. I, for one, will say, I am looking for some inspiration right now, right? I want to go and tour the Guggenheim right now. I need a break. I need a chance to interact with something that is not COVID related. That's one way that they're providing value, is to be able to do virtual tours, right? So are you providing inspiration to people? Are you educating and innovating at this current moment? How can you connect with at least one element of your work in this current crisis? I would want to share about the Children's Center of Antelope Valley. They are an organization that helps children and families dealing with abuse and trauma, right? So really critical organization at this time. It is one of those essential pieces. And you would think, well, they're probably okay right now, or maybe they're all working from home and things are slowing down or stopped, right? But what they're seeing is that with kids at home all day, parents at home all day, or foster parents at home all day, there are so many more opportunities for issues to come up, right? I wouldn't have thought about that as an outsider. And so that's one of the ways that they are connecting people back in from this crisis into their mission. When I think about your core values, your overall mission, and then again, that long-term strategic vision, if that needs to kind of realign a bit more with what's currently going on. But again, focus on those core values first and foremost to be sharing out how you are dealing with the current crisis. If you're an organization that doesn't have, let's say, a big shift, I don't know who this would be, but if you don't have, say, a big shift to what's going on for you this year, maybe it's other ways that you're utilizing your facility. For example, the Fairplex, is pretty dead most of the year. They have switched over from, focusing on the fair in August to being a place for drive-through testing or for food pickups. They are utilizing their Child Development Center to provide daycare for first responders. So while their mission doesn't necessarily 100% align with being kind of crisis management, they found ways that the services they provide and the space that they provide can align with the current issues. Ash?
Thanks, Lindsay. Our next slide here talks about motivation. And I know even in the best of times, many of us struggle with motivating our leadership from the top down. But that's really where leadership starts, right? It starts at the top. One thing that I think it's important to consider in your perspective is that American philanthropy, as we understand it, has been around just as long as the American economy. The way that philanthropic dollars flow in the United States, you will not see that type of organization and activity anywhere else in the world. It's very much a part of American culture, and it has been resilient over time. When we look at graphs of giving year over year, just going back 200 years, some of the first fire stations, some of the first hospitals in the country, they were built through philanthropy. Philanthropy is resilient, it is enduring, and what we know for sure is that it's going to be essential in picking up the pieces of whatever this sort of disaster leaves behind. And so that belief really does come from the top. And you can use that as leadership within your organizations to help motivate many of your stakeholders from the board down of how they can be communicating those timeless messages to different constituents or among each other. So one of the things I think that I want to share with you as an example is the Caton Children's Museum board. So we talked about the museum earlier. The board has been incredible in responding to these challenges. And I think at first, when the museum closed down for the crisis, the CEO called and said, how am I supposed to get my board to pay attention or care about this right now when there's a public health crisis going on? They have to worry about their kids and their families. They don't have time to think about our small museum. Picking up the phone and asking will do a world of wonders. Sending out an email to different committees of the board saying, I know that your mind is in a million places, but can you assist us in this one particular task, or can you help us in this one particular way? If we can engage our board members in one small activity to keep the wheel moving, that motivation will trickle outward to all of your other constituents. So get creative and thoughtful about where the board plugs in during this time, even if you are an organization that's not necessarily a first responder, like a hospital or a food bank. Looking at administrative leadership, motivation from the top is essential internally as well. What is administrative leadership communicating to different levels of staff, whether it be development or otherwise, about the future of the organization and what we're committed to? What are our institutional priorities at this time? The more common place where we've seen a lot of motivation and momentum is around response funds, emergency response funds, or resiliency funds, and that may not be appropriate for your organization. So talk with your leadership about what that is. What are the key points that we're going to motivate folks around, and let's move in that direction as a group with consensus. The organization's constituents, all your donors, all your friends, they will feed off of the motivation that you are projecting. And so I'm sure everyone on the call can think back just over the last 7 days to all the different emails that have flooded your inbox. And it's very clear where enthusiasm and hopefulness is communicated in certain correspondences, and in others where it's more crisis and emergency. Even a subtle shift in tone like that can do wonders for motivation, and it's something to be thinking about very critically during this time. And that takes us to our last piece of our 10 timeless principles, and in many ways, sort of the most important one. As professional fundraisers, what we do at the heart of our work is connection. What we do is connect with people and meet them where they are and pull them into what we're doing as an organization to support the greater good. Whether it's in education or in the arts or in religion, we are looking at the ways that people can engage in a specific part of the sector and help to make change. Change is sort of deeply connected with empathy. There is so much going on right now and so much changing very quickly. You know, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, thinking about something from where they're standing or where they are, allows us to stand shoulder to shoulder with people and really think about the future together. Staying out of judgment and listening, you know, you may personally have a very optimistic or pessimistic view of the future, but recognizing that none of us actually know the future is really important. It's important when trying to connect with staff, of course, just being able to get through daily work, but also stakeholders and donors and friends. Where are they coming from? What are their concerns? What are their fears? How can you meet them where they are and help to address some of that so that in the end, you're closer to them and not a bit further away because of any judgment. Everyone has emotions during this time, and some of those emotions are running very high. The world was very different 3 weeks ago, and I'm sure some of your organizations might have had requests that were in play, strategies that you were working through as you were coming up to the end of quarter1, and someone was right on the cusp maybe of making a donation or making a gift. Trying to follow up on that conversation normally, as you normally would, is tone deaf. And I think all of us are on this call and we understand that, which is why we're here. But recognizing that emotion, acknowledging it, that someone may not be in the same headspace they were 3 weeks ago, to make that gift right away is important. And with donors, transparency is always the best policy. So instead of taking the time or wondering, kind of walking around the phone in the circle of should I call, should I not call, sometimes meeting that emotion head on to say, I know where we were 3 weeks ago is very different to where we are now, but our needs are still the same, if not more urgent. And I completely realize that this may not be the time for you to engage in this discussion with me, but I would be doing a disservice to the organization if I didn't try. Sometimes when we are that honest and authentic and open, just on a human level, people will, again, meet us where we are, and help to make that change happen. Communicating that, you can recognize the emotion that you're seeing or the fear that you're seeing is what gives human elements to the work that we do. Animal organizations right now are in some ways kind of the least impacted by what's going on. But there is a human element to animal rights work or environmental preservation work. And a lot of the sort of, we've seen around popular topics that what people are experiencing is really grief. Pacific Marine Mammal Center, which is an organization that we work with, has really used this time of social distancing to be able to get folks to focus on animal rights issues that are important, that are still happening in the background of everyday life. And just when we're able to slow down and not contribute to pollution, for example, as a byproduct of just participating in society, the organization has really used this time to elevate some of those issues in a creative way. So showing empathy and meeting people where they are sometimes is an opportunity to then go in and talk about your organization. I know that this wraps up our planned presentation, and we wanted to leave a considerable amount of time for questions which are flowing in. So Lindsay, I'll turn it over to you to maybe take one of these to get us started, and we'll go from there.
Sure. I did want to also touch on the new CARES Act as well, because that's been on everybody's mind a lot right now. Specifically for organizations with 500 employees or less to maintain payroll, be able to pay rent, utilities, anything to be able to operate. If you are interested in this at all, I would say get started on an application. We have had clients that were calling in and literally waiting by the computer, refreshing the page, waiting for the application to come out. So people are acting on this. There's a limited amount of funds. So if you do think your organization could or should qualify, I would urge you to apply. This is an extraordinary opportunity to be able to support some of those basic operating needs for your organization. For many of us, that includes development. And we want to be able to, at the very least, let donors know that we are being as proactive as possible. We are reaching out to every possible avenue that we can to ensure that our organization has a strong foundation of support. And therefore, even if we didn't get funding, we did apply for it. Right. So we can answer a few more questions that related to that as well, but I did want to just touch upon it to let you all know that nonprofits also qualify for that support. The other half of that then too is what donors are able to deduct in their taxes from this year. There's a much higher level of up to 100% of gross income is able to be deducted in terms of charitable donations. So it's not really what we see as the number one motivation for people when they're considering giving. It's typically ranked as number 7 is tax implications. But for some, it may be really helpful this year, right? Either giving that they've already done or paying off pledges that they've made through the rest of the year early, or a 5-year pledge early. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into a couple of our questions. The first one is really, it's from Adam. So since more grassroots, smaller nonprofits are feeling the effects much more than larger nonprofits, are there things they can do differently to engage their donors and weather the storm? It's a great question. All right. I would say I would look to maintaining a lot of these same basic principles, but I think you've really got an opportunity to engage people at the lowest levels of donations to create a storm, honestly, of support, right? Now is our time to band together. Something interesting that I heard from one of our religious clients is that, the church has been around for thousands of years to serve the poor, to help those in need, to clothe the naked, in moments of strife and grief. And now is the time for our members to rally around us and ensure that we're supported as well. Really interesting take on that message, but I think, again, looking at a groundswell of support can allow people to be part of something that's meaningful, even if it's just at a dollar level, right? I think the impact of this current crisis is affecting a lot of people in a lot of different ways financially, right? And there are some who will tell you, I can't even think about this right now. There are some who will tell you, I can't now, but there's a possibility for later. And there's some that will say, absolutely, I want to support. Right. So some of this is just being sure that we are allowing those donors to make that decision for themselves and positioning it so that they can feel like they're being part of something important. So I would urge you to consider things like text to give, online giving, and promoting that too. Really, that's good news that you can share. We, with the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles, are sharing good news on their website as their emergency fund is growing. Just in 3 or 4 days, just by having something on their website, they've already gotten $10,000 and more than 300 donations without any promotion. It's good news. We want to share it. We want to tell people that we have donors who are supporting, and they can be a part of that in some way, right? It doesn't have to be a major gift. It doesn't have to be something huge. Ashika, I'm gonna read this next question and throw it to you to answer. Do you think it's appropriate to ask for specific dollar amounts from donors, specifically major donors?
Right. It's a good question as well. And look, it's bold. It's a bold move to ask for a targeted donation during this time, but this is the time to be bold. For those of you who are well-versed in major gift fundraising, you know the primary principle of major gift fundraising is being thoughtful about that ask. How did you arrive at that targeted number? It's important now to explain to donors that background, specifically to connect with the donor and say, I'm asking you for this gift because, and here's what's going to result because of your contribution. That's true always, but I think it's more important now. So I would not be hesitant or gun shy to make a specific targeted dollar ask. We are tracking fundraising activity across the firm, so that's across the country, and we are seeing daily reports of our colleagues across the country closing 6-figure, 7-figure commitments, surprisingly, outside of health in many cases. I think it's becoming a topic of conversation that a lot of the work that we're doing, even outside of health, lends a hand in strengthening the cultural fabric of our communities. And to go back to the earlier question about grassroots organizations, it is those organizations that anchor local communities. And we notice it specifically now with everybody inside, how deeply those organizations and their work is missed. And so don't think that because you might be a small shop and you might not have as much impact, that you shouldn't sort of get in the ring and put your hand up for support. You absolutely should. If we've learned one thing from COVID-19, it's that it has a very localized impact that's felt by everyone in the community. And anything that grassroots organizations can be doing to help mitigate that, I think is deeply appreciated right now and deeply needed. So I highly encourage specific asks, just communicate some of that thoughtfulness and that background and really tie it to the need. I'm happy to start us off on this next question, Lindsay, if you don't mind, specifically from Adam, about reallocating asks, if you will, or strategies for something like PPE, which is urgently essential, as opposed to like a capital campaign that you might be in the middle of. And it's a great question, something that we're very much seeing the answer to in real time on the ground. We're working with not only hospitals, but all kinds of organizations on capital campaigns. The case for a capital project is very real, I think, as it relates to hospitals right now, just making sure we have the facilities in the future to accommodate the type of response that might be needed from a pandemic like this or through other disasters or other medical scenarios. But listen, this is a crisis. And during a crisis, everyone, I think, is expected to be flexible and pivot, us as people, but also the organizations that together we make up. So don't hesitate to pivot your appeals to something that's urgent or is an urgent need. I don't think it would be wise in the long run to totally dismiss capital needs. I think it's important to be transparent and say, you know, up until 3 weeks ago, our primary focus as it related to major gifts was the campaign. And we all understand the need for this campaign and the need to plan for the future. But right now, the need is PPE. And unless we have that PPE, it becomes very difficult to realize that future. And so anyone who might have been thinking about a gift, would you be willing to maybe make a decision sooner and allocate it to this fund? No one will fault you for being authentic and honest in your request. We as fundraisers don't ask for money for ourselves. We ask for money for the people and the communities that we serve. And this is the time where they need our help the most. And like I said earlier in the presentation, I challenge you all to think about if it's even a disservice in many ways to stop asking during this time. It's an important question to consider in the context of your organization. Lindsay, any thoughts there?
Yeah, actually, thanks so much. I do think, you know, a lot of the organizations that we're working with are pivoting right now. However, a few are still staying the course with their capital campaign, in addition to what they're raising annually or any emergency appeals. One that comes to mind is the Orange County Ronald McDonald House. They are working to more than double the size of their house, so from 21 rooms up to 42. It's a campaign they've been working on for a long time, about a year now, and they're in the last probably 6 months to a year of that campaign. And some important things to note in terms of their messaging, they're really talking about how while they can't have new families coming into the house now, as soon as we are no longer restricted by physical distancing, they're going to have a flood of families coming back to the house, right? And the need for the house is going to continue to grow, right? So they're all of a sudden going to be right back where they were just a month or two ago. And they're still going to see a huge need growing from that point, right? There's still going to be more and more kids who are coming to CHOC to be treated for illness or injury, and they're going to need to be able to address that. So while construction isn't starting probably for another year, they are going to have to continue to do fundraising. And there are people who want to support it. One of our other campaigns for a religious organization actually just had someone come in and pay off 90% of their pledge that they had made just a couple months ago. And on the same day, we had another donor pledge another $50,000 towards their campaign effort, right? They see that there is an end to the crisis. They want to be helpful. They're trying to find ways to get involved. And so I would encourage you to really have a very honest conversation with your leadership. Bring in board members and donors for their thoughts and opinions. You know, our campaign chair at Ronald McDonald House is the most gung-ho person about communicating with people and being sure that they know what's going on with the campaign right now, being sure that there's no misinformation also that's spreading around about what's going on at the organization or with the campaign right now. But they can be some of your best allies in thinking about how do we move forward, what's the appropriate timing, let's continue this conversation and maybe make some decisions about whether we need to pivot or not, or to what degree. Do we have...
The one thing that that I would add to that, and I know there's a new question in the box, so Lindsay, if you just want to give it a read and jump in, is that there are some things that are unusual about the times that we're in, right? The fact that we're all home and we can't interact with each other. But there's something that's very much the same as it's always been, which is as fundraisers, there are metrics that we can control and there are metrics that we cannot control. The metrics that we cannot control is how much someone is going to give and when they're going to give. Those are decisions that are always with the donor. And we may have insight into those things, but until they manifest, they could go anyway. The one metric that we can always control and we can still control is how often we're asking and what we're asking for. And so if you think about the organizations that you're working with and any sort of gap in operating reserves that you might have, put a pipeline together. Put a pipeline of how much the need is, the total amount of the need, assign prospects to certain dollar amounts and work your pipeline. These are strategies that work on any given day of the year, but they certainly work right now and shouldn't be overlooked.
All right. So we are going to cover one or two more questions here. And the most recent one is, what advice, if any, would you give a person who moved to a new state as a fundraiser during this time? Man, what an opportune time to switch states, move to a new neighborhood, and then be trapped in your house. I certainly feel for you at this time. But I'd say something that actually a lot of our CCS colleagues are doing right now, while some of our clients are pivoting to more emergency fund needs, is taking the time to research, to dig through donor profiles, to spend time thinking about who's connected to who, to actually get out and have a coffee or two. My suggestion would be, what a great time to see if you could video connect with somebody over coffee and say, as soon as we're done with this physical distancing, what's the coffee shop we should meet at? Help me get to know the neighborhood, help me get to know the area a little bit better. I want to utilize my time right now to just become as knowledgeable as I can about you as a donor, about your priorities, about our neighborhood, about our organization, and really be sure that I'm set for helping this organization to continue to succeed. That would be my advice. Ashka, do you have any additional?
Yeah, it's a great question because I'm also not a California native. I'm a transplant from other parts of the country. And one thing that I think about often and reference often is that factually this side of the country is about 100 years younger than the other side of the country, than the East Coast. And again, thinking back to what I said about philanthropy being a part of American history since its inception, there are certain trends that we see on the East Coast that look differently over here, just given how long things have sort of infrastructure has existed in California. Leverage that, especially if you have experience in another landscape. CCS does a lot of landscape analytics, and I think we take a lot of consideration of the landscape into the work that we do, because philanthropy looks different in all parts of the country, in every community, in every state. The guiding principles are generally the same, but the way that that philanthropy manifests in a community looks different. What are some things that you've learned from the community that you've come from that could apply to where you are now and the scenario that you're in right now? And what are some things that look different here, or some things that you can leverage in the environment that you're in now in relation to the experience that you've had in the past to really get innovative? I would use that sort of newness as a strength, as a tool to get you to think really creatively about how you can combine experiences to really develop that innovative solution to the way forward.
All right. Ashka, I'm just going to check in with you and see if there's anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap.
Just this question from Rob about the resources that are available to learn more about philanthropy in general. Definitely our website. We write several blogs and white papers on the work that we do. We also share a lot of client spotlights, so it gives you some insight into a lot of different sectors. LinkedIn, surprisingly, people share some of the greatest tools and resources on LinkedIn, so definitely build your network there. And I would also say the Chronicle. The Chronicle for our industry during this time has really provided a 36,000 feet view to what we're seeing in general across the board. So definitely stay closely connected to the Chronicle. Those are my thoughts. Lindsay, any resources from you?
I think those are great. Those are the ones I turn to most often. I'd also say for some baseline information, CCS does this Perspectives on Philanthropy once a year, and we provide information about that on our website and on our blog. But if you're looking for deeper information, Giving USA is the organization that amalgamates a lot of data. And so that's a great place to start. Or the Lilly School in Indiana has some great resources as well. And I'm sure everyone on the webinar today could probably provide you with 6 or 7 different links or books or articles to reference. So be sure to utilize the AFP network as well to see about some interesting information.
There's an additional question here, and since we have a little bit of time, I think it's an important one. Is it too soon to kick off a fundraising campaign? I'm really glad that this question came up. a campaign is essentially planning for the future, right? Gathering the capital that you need, the dollars that you need to plan and realize the future. Is it ever too soon to plan for the future? No. In fact, most people find that they should have started yesterday. Most organizations find that. And it might be too soon to start asking. If you're thinking about starting a campaign today, I wouldn't go out at the end of the month to immediately begin asking. But for those of you who've been through campaigns before, you know that there's a certain amount of time in the beginning, anywhere from a couple of months to about 6 months, where you're doing a lot of infrastructure building and planning. You're developing your case, you're recruiting your leadership and onboarding them, you're creating policies and procedures for the campaign. All of this groundwork is how you create the infrastructure to then bring people in and create energy and momentum around a fundraising effort. That's what a campaign is. And so is it too soon? Absolutely not. But think how you go about planning your next steps and how you look at your timeline should definitely take into consideration, where we are right now, but it certainly should not slow you down.
I would add a point to that too, is that if you're planning now, you're in a better position than most other organizations at the same point to be asking sooner, right? If we wait to do the planning for 3 or 4 months, that means we're probably 10 months to 12 months out from asking. Whereas if we're doing the planning now, we may only be 6 months out from asking or 3 months out from asking and getting things started with a campaign. So much as Ashka was saying, start your planning now, think about it now. Our experience in 2008, I can speak personally to the Diocese of Honolulu, which was a nice gig, by the way, where I was working at the time. We had our very first campaign kickoff on the day that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac fell. And they still had an incredible campaign. It was rocky to start, but they got through those first couple months of the panic and the concern and the worry, and they went over goal. They were aiming to raise 30 million. They raised more than 35 in one of the toughest fundraising environments, but they were well prepared to keep things moving as best they could while people were processing, and then we're in a better position as people had processed and were ready to move forward.
A lot of the confidence, Lindsay, I think that you are alluding to in that story alone is generated by the amount of time you put into building that community and up until that day. And right now, with all of us as fundraising professionals, we are all feeling the uncertainty of the space that we're in. We're all looking for resources to help educate ourselves. Your greatest resource in many ways is each other and your AFP community. So lean on each other, reach out to each other, connect with each other, share your frustrations, share your ingenuity and your solutions, and stay connected with us too, because that's how we're going to get through this. We're going to get through it together. And one thing that we know for sure, I think, as our 70+ years as a firm, is all that really matters in the end is how we worked together and how we treated each other and where we ended up as a community. And we see that time and time again with our campaigns from clients that sort of run back-to-back campaigns. In their ability to be successful, it's their ability to stay united. So, definitely lean into that.
I can't think of anything else to add. So Adam, I would ask for you maybe to close us out.
Sure. Thank you both, Lindsay and Ash, for speaking today. We really appreciate you coming on and CCS Fundraising. We typically offer a beer mug and a pen set from AFP for you guys. So we'll either have to mail that to you or we'll see you in person and give those to you as a thank you as our speakers.
Love it.
We're going to hold you to it to have us back in person so that cements the opportunity for the future.
I promise we will hold those for you. And
wonderful.
With that, thank you. I mean, I'm getting a lot of compliments on this presentation. A lot of people really enjoyed it. And, just to let everyone know, next month we are having a webinar too. We're doing it with a panel of family foundations, but we're doing it virtually. We're going to be doing it through Zoom, and we're actually not going to be charging for it, but we're going to be asking everyone to make a donation to the chapter. So if any of you are available, we'd love to have you join us on May 7th, Thursday, May 7th at 12 p.m. With that, again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you again, Lindsay and Ash, for speaking today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thanks for your time, everyone. Take good care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.